The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. With the BC Provincial Government's mandate to increase density by allowing the building of fourplexes on single-family lots, we're going to experience a demolition crisis, says Glyn Lewis of Renewal Development. From an environmental and economic perspective, demolition is not a wise choice, he says. Currently, 2,700 homes are demolished each year across Metro Vancouver to make room for higher density development. All must go to landfill sites, or do they have to? Lewis says every day we come across a home slated for demolition that's in perfectly good condition, homes that can be saved and repurposed. The average 1,500 square foot home sent to a landfill contains 100 tons of raw materials that have substantial market value. Wood, drywall, plastics, carpets, insulation, roofing materials, all with aftermarket value, says Lewis. I invited Glyn Lewis of Renewal Development to join me for a conversation that matters about relocation alternatives to demolition that protect the environment and provide new housing for growing urban areas. Glyn, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Stu.
What inspired you to do this? Because I think, people go, oh yeah, okay, this house has got to come down to make room for the next.
Right.
You went, hold it just a second, there's a better way.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and there's a huge, big story arc in terms of my life, in terms of how I got to this point. But I think the easy part of telling this story would just be, I was studying chemistry at Simon Fraser University, and I watched Inconvenient Truth, Al Gore's documentary about climate change, and it really awakened me to the climate crisis. And if we're going to sustain life on this planet, we have to be more responsible stewards of our natural resources and the planet that sustains us. So I actually shifted my focus from chemistry to environmental chemistry, and I wanted to study atmospherics and rainwater contamination and all those kind of things. And then I kind of realized, well, we kind of know the research, we know what's out there, we know what the problems are, and I felt limited in terms of the impact that I would have just by being a researcher or a chemist out in the field. So I actually got into politics, and this is when Barack Obama was running for president. I ended up going down to the United States. I spent a year crisscrossing the country because I felt that, we know what we need to do. Now it's just about putting the will in place to find better solutions, to build more sustainable communities, to be better stewards of our natural resources. And I've done that. I did that for about 10, 15 years, both in the United States and in Canada. I started a tech company that built software for political campaigns and movements. And all of that kind of was just the foundation for me of being an agent for change. And I actually studied, there's actually one more preamble to that, is I actually studied this thing called Sustainable Community Development at SFU, wonderful program. And the director of the program, Dr. Mark Roseland, I wrote my thesis with him, and we really studied, so how do we build more sustainable communities, more responsible communities? And that was my educational foundation. Then I went off into politics in the United States and Canada. I came back, and about 6 years ago, Stu, my sister lived in this charming 1920 home in Esquimalt. And I always compare it to the movie Up, the Pixar movie, because her and her partner, young couple, very ambitious and wide-eyed, and they saw this beautiful 1920 home, and they moved into it, and they took such good care of it. And they fixed it up, and they replaced the windows, and they painted, and they had 2 dogs, and it was a house full of life. Unfortunately, what happened is a developer bought the whole city block and did a land assembly because they wanted to tear down all of these single-family homes for density, which is something that we see happen across the region every day right now, especially as the province is pushing for all of this density. But we can get more into that a bit later. Mm-hmm. So when this happened, she had the idea of saving her home. So she bought a property with her partner just north of Souk, and they picked up the home and they put it on a truck and they brought it to Souk. And when she did this, Stu, it awakened this great idea in my head, like, this is such a brilliant model. It's more affordable, it's more sustainable, you're saving the character and the heritage of the home. Why don't we do more of this? Mm-hmm. And that was the genesis, just asking that question of why don't we do more of this was the genesis of me starting Renewal Development.
So it's the mission that was driving you. Not saying, okay, I'm going to strike it rich because here's this need. It's the mission to save our environment.
Yeah, I have a really good friend, Alicia Stewart, and she tells me, Glenn, I kind of walk her through the challenges and the complexities of this business model, and she says, there's easier ways to make money, Glenn. And if you're really motivated only by the money, maybe you wouldn't do this, because this is challenging and complex and complicated. But it was this idea of there's something really interesting and creative behind this, which is to look at and think about development differently, but also to do so in a way that was more mission, vision, values aligned with, for me, which was how do we build more sustainable communities in a more responsible way.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. What's the cost of tearing down your home? Let's say you're a property owner and you go, yeah, but I now want to build that fourplex because I'm sitting on a gold mine, and I want to get this thing out of here. Wouldn't they look at it and go, isn't it cheaper for me to tear this down? Or what's the equation to the actual homeowner?
Right. So, we went through years of iterating on this model. I will say, there are moving companies that have existed for hundreds of years.
Right. We've seen them move houses before.
Moving homes isn't particularly a new model. I'm going to come back to answer your question, but one of the foundations of me building this company was just asking the question, okay, how many homes do we tear down every year across Metro Vancouver? And it turns out it's about 2,700.
It's a lot.
How many are in good condition, right? Have nice bones, relatively well maintained and renovated, and how many of those can we move? And it turns out it's about 700. So there's about 700 homes that are in perfectly good condition that we can move every year. So I looked at that number and I said, okay, well, how many are we moving every year? And it turns out it's about 50. So the existing companies are only moving 50 homes a year, which is great. They've been doing this for decades and they have their model and all that kind of stuff. But it really sparked the question to me, is why is there such a significant gap between 50 and 700? And what I realized too is that there's a lot of process inefficiencies. And there's a lot of systemic inefficiencies and complexities that if we could solve those inefficiencies and those challenges and those sticky points and make this more efficient and make this more seamless, we should be doing this hundreds of times a year. And I think that's the innovation that we're bringing to this industry right now. So to answer your question, so what I've learned I have to do is I have to become a demolition company. I call ourselves a sustainable demolition company, but I go to a developer and I say, listen, you've got 10 homes that you're doing a land assembly with. I assess them, and I quote as if I'm a demo company. So it might be $30,000, $40,000 per home, abatement, demolition, tree clearing, all that kind of stuff. I take care of your whole site. This is new. Mm-hmm. And what I then do...
I'm not aware of this, yeah.
And what I do is I then take a look at, and I assess those 10 homes, and it turns out maybe 2 or 3 of them are actually really good and can be moved. So that's how I get my supply. You've just paid me to provide you a service, which any other demolition company would do for you, and yet I just try to find the most sustainable way to maximize the reuse of the materials within that site. So on that side, it's cost neutral for you, which is great.
Yeah.
And one of the benefits for you is that you get to show that you're being a responsible developer. You're trying to maximize the reuse of materials. The community's happy with you because you've tried to do something that's responsible, and the city council's happy with you, right? So from their perspective, why not do this, right? It's cost neutral, timeline comparative, and you look good doing it. Makes a lot of sense, right?
What's been the uptake?
My conversion rate right now, Stu, is phenomenal, because especially when they start watching these big projects like with West Groups or the different developers around the community, the region that are doing this, I just keep getting more and more phone calls saying, hey, Glenn, I saw what you did with West Group. I saw what you did with this different developer.
I guess they get even more bonus points if they're building purpose-built rental. Really?
On that site.
Yeah.
Right. Well, ultimately they come to me because they want a service, which is a site clear. Right. So phenomenal interest and phenomenal uptake on that side. Now, what do I do on the other side? Because I have another set of clients.
Well, okay, let's get to that. And then I want to go, what's your disassembly process? Would it be different than guy comes in with a backhoe and starts to just knock down houses?
Right. So for the 7 homes that I can't move, maybe they're too big or they're not in good enough condition, I'm a conventional demolition company, and I would try to salvage the concrete and send it to the right recycling place and all that kind of stuff, right? So you do your abatement, you do your demolition, you try to sort it a little bit to send the wood to certain processing and the concrete to certain processing, but it's pretty conventional. Mm-hmm. with the 2 or 3 homes, let's say it's 2 homes, and with the 2 homes that I am going to save, I still have to abate the basement. I still have to get the basement ready for demolition because I can't take the basement. I can only take from the floor joist and up.
Yeah.
And then the mechanics of it is basically steel beams going under the floor joist.
Oh, so you're going to lift the house and
then you lift it.
Yeah.
Right? So, and they put these cribbings, and then there's like these jacks. It just looks like a car jack.
Right.
They're all synchronized. The jacks push up on the beams push the house up. And then you got the house up on the air with these big steel beams underneath it. And then you attach the beams to dollies, and you attach the beams and the steel beams to a bunk and then the truck. So that's how you physically lift it and you move it away. Now the question is, who's paying me to do that, right? So on that side, I have a whole other set of clients, which are people who want cost-effective, sustainable, good housing. Now they're low-density housing, so it makes a little bit more sense outside of this growing urban area, the Sunshine Coast, Comox Courtney, you go up and down the coast of British Columbia. There's communities where there's a lot of land and they're looking for affordable housing. So they are my client on the other side.
They're buying the house.
I'm providing them a prefabricated home, and it turns out it's about 50% cheaper than buying a modular or prefab home.
Wow. When did you start this?
I started this 5 years ago.
How many homes do you think that you've saved so far?
Well, the first 4 years was just iterating and learning. Because, Stu, we're the only company that I know of in North America that is vertically integrated the way that we are. To do the demolition service, to do the moving service, and then once the home gets to the destination site, the repurposing work. Because once you deliver it, well, you want to add a foundation, you want to do the service connections, you might have some renovation that you might want to do to the home that we brought to your place. So we take this thing cradle to cradle. And I've learned, I was telling you about all the sticky points and the inefficiencies in the model before.
Well, I was going to get to that. What are those?
Well, part of it is that the process to take this from cradle to cradle is challenging, inefficient, it's novel, it's not cookie cutter, right? So it's like you're dealing with a snowflake every time.
Yeah.
And so dealing with a snowflake every time, you've got to look at it, and it's got its own design challenges. Will it fit on this lot? What do the setbacks look like? What do the connections look like? Or the electrical boxes on that side, but the poles on this side, right? So there's all of these things that you have to work through.
What are the bylaws that you have to work within?
What do the bylaws look like?
Because they're different in every municipality.
So I've learned that to make this process the least sticky as possible, I have to internalize and solve all of those problems for people.
And how?
Oh, so how many homes? Yeah. So the first 3-4 years, it was a lot of iterating and trying to figure out and learn the model, and we're still iterating on the model, to be really honest with you, Stu. But we've done about 27 homes now. So, which is, for a small company like ours, we're really happy with that. And this last year has been growing a lot. We've been working with a lot of different First Nation communities that need good affordable housing. And so we've been really working to put these pieces together. And I think now that we've really proven ourselves, the sky's the limit, at least here in the Pacific Northwest.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. In my introduction, I talked about plastics and insulation and wiring and copper and all these things. What exactly are the environmental hazards that are associated with throwing all that stuff into a landfill? Because much of that stuff has, if you look at entropy and known rate of decline, they sit there for hundreds of years. And so what is the environmental impact that you are now helping to reduce?
Yeah, and it's so interesting you say that, Sue, because I come from a background in politics, and ultimately at my core I'm a change agent, right? And I often say that Renewal, my company, is a campaign disguised as a company. Because what we're really trying to do is change a paradigm, and it's the demolition paradigm. It's this notion of extracting resources, processing resources, using them, and then just throwing them away. And how disconnected that feels to me, emotionally, value system-wise, spiritually, from the actual earth that sustains us. And so I think there's a lot of people in different ways trying to reestablish that relationship. So we don't think of the world and the resources in this myopic, singular, focused way, but looking at it more holistically. And I think that is part of the campaign, is to change that paradigm. So we're more responsible stewards of the land and water. And I think this company is trying to do that. I'm trying to force change on the demolition industry. I'm literally trying to change that industry by proving that there's a more responsible way. And then policy. We meet often with city councils and trying to get them to understand that, listen, you have a waste problem. It's coming back to some of the questions about what are the impacts. 1/3 of Metro Vancouver's landfills are full of construction and demolition waste. 1/3. On a per,
1/3?
1/3. On a per capita basis, we are one of the demolition capitals of the world right now.
Because we're tearing stuff down to build new stuff.
So many of these homes down, right? And I have friends around the world, Stu, who look at this and this makes no sense, because you look at some of these homes and they're brand new. We see homes built in the last 5 or 10 years that are now slated for demolition. And no one else in the world would be like, how does that make sense that that's slated for demo? So 1/3 of our landfills are full of construction and demolition waste. The average 1,500 square foot home has about 100 tons of raw materials. There's about 60 to 80 trees in those homes, and especially the pre-1970 homes, it's all first growth lumber, right? And embodied in that home is about 23 tons of carbon. That's embodied carbon that went into the construction of it, right?
Which is sequestered.
Which is sequestered carbon.
Right.
Yeah. So we're trying to preserve all of that and just reuse it.
Okay, and I see it when you go, okay, let's take the house and jack it up and we'll move it somewhere. Probably got a few questions about the challenges of doing that.
Right.
I mean, going down the road with a house on the back of your truck, you got a lot of overhead wires and other challenges. But when it comes to the houses that you can't save, is it economically practical for you to disassemble and save a lot, especially that wood? Because as we talked about, I mean, you've got sequestered carbon right there.
Yeah.
And to reuse it, or is it impractical?
It's practical. You can physically do it, and there's companies that they're called deconstruction companies, where they physically pull the whole building apart, and they put the windows in a pile, they put the doors in a pile, they put the wood in another pile, and they'll upcycle it. And the wood, especially, I'm sitting here in this beautiful table here, a lot of that wood can be replaned, pull the nails out, and build furniture out of it. Or people are putting it back into homes now. So there's a lot of opportunity with the raw materials itself as components, which isn't really what I focus on. I try to deal with the entire home. The challenge with that industry is that it's labor intensive and it's a little bit more costly than demolition.
Yeah.
And developers especially are really hard pressed to go with anything that's 10, 20, 30% more than what they can get at the lowest possible price, right? So I think that's where policy needs to shift. Policy needs to move in the direction to create the right incentives for those developers to be like, okay, we'll do deconstruction. There's a lot of great materials in there. But without policy, Stu, that's a hard sell to people who are looking for the cheapest, fastest thing. My model's good because I can be cost competitive, right? But it's that deconstruction piece that I think there's a couple more years of maturation in that industry and from a policy perspective to get there.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. So at the moment, you're still a small company.
Yeah.
And so you can only save so many houses a year. What's it going to take for you to scale up? One, to get the acceptance in the marketplace, but two, to also be able to build a company that's sustainable, because you can't suddenly be 50 times larger than you are right now.
Right. Well, it's not like a tech company. Construction is very equipment intensive, labor intensive, all of that kind of stuff. So the scaling is a bit more sticky. I will say though that what the province is doing, and just coming back to that piece here for a second because it was in your intro, there's this massive push for density right now. We're not just seeing it here in Metro Vancouver. It's across a lot of urban areas across North America, right? There's this huge cry for more housing. Housing prices are so expensive. We need more supply. And I think, to the credit of the provincial government and local governments that are supporting it, is that they're promoting the densification of our urban areas. I actually support that, right? I don't think, having to drive 30 minutes to get to school or to get to your coffee shop makes sense. I think it was a modality of development of the post-war era,
right,
of the suburbs and the freeways and all of that stuff. But and we had a lot of land to do that, right? I think the challenge with achieving that level of density, Stu, is the process is so wasteful. And so that's what I'm really saying. I'm not saying let's not densify. I'm saying let's densify. I'm just saying let's do it in a responsible way. And so when the province has created this blanket rezoning of all of these single-family lots across these urban areas and across the province, it's just going to fuel all of this development and this demolition.
Right.
And so that's going to increase our supply. It's going to mean there's going to be a lot more homes available for us to save and to relocate and to repurpose, which is good for my business and my business growth perspective, right? I think that's going to create opportunity for us. I think we're going to need to acquire more equipment and more, our trades, and because really the niche skill set is the lifting and the moving part in this whole thing, right?
Right.
You can be a demo company. There's lots of them out there. You could be a renovation company, a construction company. There's lots of people who do that, right? The niche is that lifting and that moving part, and that's where we have to make sure we have enough capacity to meet the demand over the next 5, 10, 15 years.
So let's say you take a house from Dunbar and it's going to Qualicum Beach or Bowser. How do you get it there, and what are the complications of moving it?
It's a challenge. I mean,
because you touched on the fact that that's the hard part.
That's the hard part. I mean, it's a challenge, but it's also the rewarding part, is trying to solve this puzzle. And it feels like puzzle solving. And so, the first thing you do is you go and you inspect the home. Is it worth saving? Is it in good enough condition? Is there enough value here to go through? And not all homes do. I told you there was 2,700 homes that we demolished. There's probably like 700 that are worth saving.
Right.
So it's about 20%. So once we've assessed that the home has value, then the question is, can we move it? That's the second important question. And we come across a lot of beautiful mansions. And, you drive up and down Oak Street or Granville Street, you go left and right about 2-3 blocks, all of that's going to get demolished.
Yeah.
And we see homes, mansion homes worth $2 million, Stu, that are going to be demolished because the land is worth so much, right? Now, the problem with the $2 million mansion that's got 8 bedrooms, it's really, you can't move it.
No.
Not where it is there. If it was on the water, it's a little bit easier. And the reason why you can't move it is because of the width and the height and all of those kind of things. So the bread and butter of this industry are ranchers and bungalows, single-story homes, right? Things that look like a shoebox.
Yeah.
Because you look at the width and you're looking at about, let's say, 28 to 32 feet wide. You can fit that through a standard street, right? Then the height's the other question.
Because you got overhead.
Because you got the overheads. You got the trolley lines in Vancouver. You've got the, utility lines, and then you've got overpasses. So single story, shoebox orientation is the bread and butter, and there's hundreds of thousands of homes like that.
Wow. It's a kind of an exciting time to be in your position, because you are actually you're actually able to instigate change the way that you've been so motivated to do over the course of your career and lifetime.
Thanks for saying that, Stu. And I think people feel that we're not just trying to do this for the sake of making money. We're really trying to have a positive impact, and we really believe in what we're doing. And you have to fight sometimes to save some of these homes, right? Someone says, well, no, there's a tree in the way, or there's some branches in the way, or like I had this big thing with the park board a couple of years ago. From this little schoolhouse, we moved from Kitsilano to the Squamish Nation, the little yellow schoolhouse. Well, the park board didn't want us to go through Kitts Beach with the schoolhouse that was 110 years old. Like, the community loved this thing. And it was slated for demolition because the Vancouver School Board was running out of space in their part of the redevelopment. Well, I had to have a pretty, strong conversation with the Vancouver Park Board to let us go through the beach with this schoolhouse. They didn't want us because they were worried about the grass, they were worried about the flowers, and so there's all of these trade-offs, but you have to lean into it. And you have to say, what do we, this is a value proposition. What do we care more about? Like, we'll protect the grass. The grass will be okay. You have to worry too much about the grass.
Pretty quickly.
It'll grow back.
Yeah.
But are we going to save this 110-year-old staple of Kitsilano that's been sitting there? It's got this beautiful first growth lumber, and the Squamish Nation wants the building. So those are the kind of things you have to lean into sometimes, and you have to fight a bit too.
Well, congratulations. Great idea. And great work that you're doing.
Thanks, Stu.
Thanks for your time.
Appreciate it.